Hi, welcome to Why is Self-Care So Hard with Gilda's Club Kansas City. I'm Clara Anderson-Sante, the program director, and we're happy to have Dr. Savannah Geske with St. Luke's Cancer Institute with us today. Go ahead, Dr. Geske.
Yes, hello. Like Clara said, my name is Savannah Geske. I am the clinical psychologist at the St. Luke's Cancer Institute and the Kuhn Center for Advanced Breast Cancer. And today I'm going to be presenting on why is self-care so hard. This is a presentation that I just recently started doing within the past year or so. And it essentially came about because I think self-care is a very kind of term that we hear a lot in the media now, and it's just very popular. But I think there's a lot of self-care confusion about exactly what that is, and also confusion about how can we make self-care a part of our daily lives and routine, and actually find something that fits our needs and makes us feel good. And so this is a presentation I've given several times and have actually gotten some pretty good feedback. So I think some of these techniques we'll talk about, you might think like, oh, well, that makes sense, or I think I've already been doing that. But hopefully some of this information will also be new. So I always like to start out with a definition about what is self-care. I think a lot of times we can think of a very basic definition, like it's anything that you do to be good to yourself. And while that's true, I think that is a very basic definition that really doesn't get a lot of down to the meat of it. Definitions that I like better are the practice of taking action to preserve or improve one's own health. I specifically really like this last one of the practice of taking an active role in protecting one's own well-being and happiness, in particular during times of stress. I think that first definition sounds very light and fluffy, and I think when we say, oh, it's anything that you do to be good to yourself, that very quickly can kind of become something that's not important. I think when we really use these very firm and kind of conscious choices of this is an active role in protecting my own well-being, particularly during stress, I think that gives it a connotation of a lot more action and really highlights the importance of self-care is not just something that we do to be good to ourselves, it's actually something that we really need to be able to take care of ourselves mentally and physically. So why is self-care so important? We hear about this on the news, your doctors might have even mentioned, taking care of yourself, self-care. Why is that so important? Why do we care so much about that enough to have a presentation about it today? Well, we actually have a lot of evidence that self-care is linked to a lot of really good outcomes. So first of all, it improves energy levels. It's not uncommon for people to spend so much time taking care of other individuals or other tasks, work, other people, that we can start to lose a lot of energy and start to get very fatigued. And so we know when we actually take time for yourself, it starts to improve energy levels and can actually make you more likely to have energy to help others in the future. It also decreases mood symptoms. We see that individuals who take time out of their day to focus on themselves and actively work to preserve their own well-being report lower rates of anxiety and depression, and they actually score higher on measures of well-being. We also see that it increases productivity. Taking a break every couple hours when you're at work or when you're completing tasks actually leads to more productivity throughout the day rather than just hunkering down and doing 8 hours straight. Self-care also enhances rest and allows for increased focus and concentration. So this is very important for anyone who is struggling with any chemo-related cognitive impairment during this time. It also improves resistance to disease. So we know that stress directly impacts our immune functioning. And so when we take time to focus on self-care and reduce our stress, we actually can see a decrease in things like colds, flus, headaches, upset stomachs, all those types of things. We also see that focusing on self-care can help to enhance self-esteem. This essentially comes from the fact that when we treat ourselves like we matter, this actually gives us a sense of intrinsic well-being. It can increase self-knowledge and allows you to give more in the future, like I mentioned, with energy level. But again, if all of those things are so good, then why aren't we all running around doing self-care constantly 24/7? Well, we actually have several barriers to self-care that can make it very difficult to enact self-care. And so this is what we're going to be spending a lot of time talking about today, is eliminating or overcoming these barriers so self-care can be easier. And the ones that we are specifically going to talk about are limited time, shame and guilt, self-care confusion, overload, and setting ourselves up for failure. So starting with shame and guilt, society has conditioned us to be constantly doing something and be working towards something productive. I think most of us can reflect on, even when we were very young, kind of getting that, that message that, you need to be helping others, you need to be doing something, if you could be standing, you should be cleaning, if any of us had any jobs when we were, teenagers. And so even if we do finish a task, there's constantly a push to prepare for what's next. Well, you finished today's things, well, now you actually better set up some stuff and get ready for tomorrow. And what that can lead to is some pretty unhelpful thoughts. One of the thoughts that I hear very often is, do I actually deserve self-care? And I hear this one a lot is, have I done enough today to justify this break? Have I accomplished enough to deserve to get to do this in the first place? And so these thoughts might sound very simple, but if these are thoughts that we have running through our head all of the time, these will really start to interfere with our ability to just take some time and focus on ourselves. These feelings or these thoughts lead us to believe that time for ourselves is somehow an indulgence and means that we're lazy or unproductive. I don't know how many times I could count that I heard people say, I'm lazy. If I take even an hour to rest, I'm lazy. And so we really need to be focusing on directly targeting these thoughts. This is where I really like cognitive behavioral therapy. So this is actually a thought record for cognitive behavioral therapy from a website that I really like called Psychology Tools. They're at psychologytools.com. And so this is a thought record that you could find online, or if you're interested, I could also share it with you. And what it does is it looks at how our thoughts impact our feelings and how those feelings and thoughts influence our behavior. So for example, if I was really struggling and I thought that maybe sitting down and doing a 15-minute mindfulness meditation would be beneficial, but my immediate thought is, no, you haven't done enough to deserve that today. Well, then I start to feel guilty when I sit down and set up, and that makes me feel worse. Then even when I'm doing the meditation, I'm just thinking about all the other things that I could be doing right now. And then that activity doesn't actually end up being restorative or restful. It actually increases my anxiety, and then I'm less likely to do that in the future, right? I didn't feel good when I did it. I was focused the whole time on what else I could be doing, and so why would I do that again? And so our thoughts really play a big part in what we do after that. So I actually have a CBT thought record worked out here. So this is, not based on, anything that a patient has told me directly. This is more of a culmination of kind of general themes that I hear a lot from individuals. So this individual, like I mentioned before, is setting up a space to do a mindfulness meditation. And she immediately starts to feel anxious and guilty. And the thoughts that run through her head are, I should be doing something else. Other people can handle this kind of stress just fine. I'm being too dramatic. I should just suck it up. So these negative thoughts that are coming from just sitting down to do a simple mindfulness meditation, if these thoughts were allowed to run wild, would really deter us from doing that meditation in the first place, or make this pleasant experience potentially unpleasant. And so what we need to do in this fourth and fifth column are start to evaluate the evidence that supports that thought and the evidence that doesn't support the thought. You can see in the column, there were actually 3 thoughts. You don't want to answer all 3 of them. You should choose one. And so the one that I've underlined and highlighted in red, other people can handle this kind of stress just fine, i.e. cancer stress is what we're talking about here. That's the thought that we're directly going to look at the evidence for and against. So we see that this person, when they were asked, all right, what's the evidence that supports that thought that other people can handle the stress just fine? This individual said, I've seen other people with coping with cancer and they seem just fine. I talked to them in the waiting room and they don't seem like anything's really bothering them at all. The other evidence was, well, my coworker went through cancer and I don't remember her being stressed out at all. Like she seemed like cool as a cucumber, and I don't remember her talking about any stress or being overwhelmed. This last piece of evidence that this individual gave was, my sister said I just have to have a positive attitude. You can see that after some discussion, we ended up crossing that one out because that's not necessarily something that supports other people can handle stress. That's just kind of a general piece of information that that person has got from one individual that really doesn't support that other people can handle this kind of stress just fine. So after some discussion, we eliminated that because it didn't seem like very strong evidence. Then what we do in this fifth column is look at the evidence that does not support that thought. And you can see, I really like down here at the bottom of the fifth column, there's actually some prompts. I have some people who, when I ask them, well, what evidence doesn't support that thought? They say nothing. I can't think of anything. Well, if that's the case, then we would want to look at these prompts down here. So what experiences indicate that this thought is not completely true all of the time? I like this one the best. If my best friend had this thought, what would I tell them? If your best friend said other people can handle this just fine, what would I do? What would I say to them? And are there any small experiences which contradict this thought? And could I be jumping to conclusions? So we asked this person those questions, and these were the responses that they came up with. So other people must find cancer stressful, or why would they have psychologists, social workers, and Gilda's Club all to help individuals cope with cancer, right? Those individuals aren't just sitting in their offices doing nothing, they're obviously seeing somebody. I have definitely seen other people looking worried or stressed at infusion. I can't read minds, so I really don't know other people's stress levels. And then this person ended up giving the example of, well, I tell people I'm fine all the time when I'm not. You know, I sit in the infusion center, and if someone asks me how I'm doing, I say fine. So maybe other people are doing the same thing. And we actually looked and saw that 50% of people struggle with anxiety at some point during treatment. So when we took into account that evidence that doesn't support that thought of other people can handle this kind of stress just fine, we look at what's an alternative thought then that takes into account this new evidence. And this individual came to the conclusion that cancer is stressful. I think we could all agree with that. And if I'm feeling overwhelmed, it's okay for me to take a few minutes for myself. So if I sat down to do a mindful meditation and I had the thought, cancer is stressful and feeling overwhelmed is okay, it's okay for me to take some time for myself, that is going to elicit a lot different emotions and feelings, right? I'm going to be more self-compassionate, I'm probably going to feel more content and happy, and it's going to make that mindfulness meditation more productive, and I'm going to feel good afterwards. And so we really need to be mindful of our own thinking about if we deserve self-care or not. And so if you're someone who kind of has this, I should be doing something else, I really don't even need to be focusing on stress, I should just work through it, this is a sheet that I would really like you to do so we can start looking at the evidence that may or may not support that thought. This next section is about shame and guilt, specifically focusing on worth and love. It's also not uncommon when we have thoughts about not deserving to do self-care is coming from a place of insecurity. I hear a lot of thoughts similar to, in order to have value to others, I must be productive. In order to be loved, I must constantly be doing things for people. I think we learn, again, as we're younger, that when we care about people, we do things for them, right? Even if we're feeling overwhelmed or we're at the end of our rope, you always do things for others. Sometimes this can come from, just purely wanting to do things for others, but sometimes it can come from that if I don't do things, maybe they won't want to be my friend anymore, right? And so if those are the type of thoughts that are standing in your way of self-care, we again want to look at the CBT thought record. So this individual is actually working on self-care by saying no to too many additional tasks. And so they're getting ready to tell their friend that they're going to be unable to help them with a project this weekend. This individual immediately starts to feel sad, frustrated, they have shame, they have guilt, and their negative thoughts that jump into their head are, I really should just go. I really should just suck it up and just go help her. She might be mad if I tell her that I can't help. Friends do things for each other. I'm a bad friend. And if I'm a bad friend, no one will want to stay friends with me. So again, this is a lot of negative automatic thoughts. And so we want to choose one. And so we chose I'm a bad friend. That's a very salient one. That's actually one that I hear a lot when people are going through treatment. As a result of treatment and fatigue and side effects, we do have to start withdrawing from more activities. This is one that I hear very often. So this person said that the evidence that supports that thought was, originally she said, I feel like a bad friend if I don't go help. And here's where I would encourage all of you to recognize the difference between thoughts and feelings. And so feelings are things a baby would have, right? I feel sad, I feel mad, I feel angry. So feeling like a bad friend is not necessarily a feeling, that's more of a thought. I think I'm a bad friend. And so I would also encourage you to really differentiate between thoughts and feelings. They also said, I already canceled on her last weekend, and I haven't been spending as much time with my friends as I should. Then we asked those questions at the bottom of column 5, and this was the evidence that does not support that thought. I do lots of things for my friends. No one has ever told me that I'm a bad friend. In fact, many people have told me I'm a good friend. Even though I cannot help with this physical issue, I still talked to her through an emotionally tough issue earlier this week. And I wouldn't be mad at my friend if she was going through cancer treatment and couldn't help me. In fact, I would want her to rest. So we ended up finding several pieces of information that don't support that thought that I'm a bad friend for taking time for myself during this stressful event. And so the alternative thought, when we look at, well, what's an alternative to that original thought of I'm a bad friend? And this individual identified, again, our fictitious individual identified, even though I might not think I'm a good friend right now, I am a good friend. And I can still take care of myself and still be a good friend. So if this individual would have declined helping with that original thought of I'm a bad friend, that afternoon that they had off probably wouldn't have even been relaxing, because the whole time they would have been worried that their friend would be mad or upset. They would have been anxious. But if we have that thought of I'm going to decline helping and it's okay to take care of myself, I would encourage my friends to do the same. We might still feel a little bit guilty, but we're not going to feel that intense guilt and anxiety that we would have felt with that other thought just running through of I'm a bad friend. And if you really get stuck on some of these, I'm a bad friend, I don't deserve this, I would really encourage you, when you have these alternative thoughts, to write those down on index cards and actually put those around your house. So if you're someone who struggles with self-care because you don't think that you deserve it, or by declining other things in order to have time for self-care that makes you a bad person, I would do this sheet and then write down those alternative thoughts and put those in places where you're going to be working on self-care. Then they're highly visible, and we're constantly reminding ourselves that we are doing this to promote our own health and well-being. I also have a lot of people get hung up on self-care confusion, and so we really need to find out exactly what your body needs to be healthy and happy. An example that I like to use is eating out may be a form of self-care to some, so all right, I had a stressful week, and on Friday night, I'm gonna go out and I'm gonna have a dinner, nice dinner, maybe a drink, and that's gonna kind of be my self-care. And that might be, something that I would enjoy as part of my self-care, but let's say that this was somebody who was trying to lose weight, lower their cholesterol, something along those lines. That individual afterwards is going to feel guilty, and they're probably going to feel worse. And so in this case, that form of self-care is not what that individual needs. That's not what their mind and body needs. And so you need to find out what exactly your mind and body need to be healthy and happy. What's right for one person is not going to be right or healthy or good for another person. And so when you start actively doing self-care, you're going to need to try out multiple different strategies to see what works for you. You might hear, oh, everybody else loves doing mindfulness and they report feeling very good and, calm afterwards. That might not be right for you. You might need to do guided imagery or progressive muscle relaxation. So I want to take this opportunity to talk about what are the different types of self-care before we go into the next barrier. Sensory is one of our categories, and that includes touch, smell, sound, taste, and sight. And so these can be, I also like to remind people that when we talk about self-care, these don't need to be big, expensive things, right? It doesn't need to be going and getting a massage, you know, an $80 massage once a month, or going and getting our nails done. Again, if that's something that you consider self-care, perfect. But these can be even very simple, small things that don't take very much time at all. And so in this category, types of self-care would be taking a hot bath, lying down and listening to music, sitting in the sun. Not today with the rain, and also with the Kansas City heat. Maybe not good to do that in July. Maybe more of a June activity. Having a small piece of chocolate, maybe getting a massage. Anything that activates those senses and is soothing or healing to us. Self-care can also be emotional. So allowing emotions to process and leave our minds. Most individuals, when we have anxiety, provoking thoughts, or stressful thoughts, our immediate thought is just get it away from me, right? Put it in a box, get it in the back of my mind, just get it out of my awareness. Well, what happens is that might work temporarily, but it's only a matter of time before that thought or that stressor resurfaces. So usually we just end up in a cycle where a stressor arises or anxiety arises, we push it away, stays away for a couple minutes or a couple hours, and then it's right back there. And so I would really encourage you to be doing processing of those emotional components through journaling, you know, taking 10 to 15 minutes to journal every day, talking with friends, family, or a therapist, letting yourself cry. I think a lot of people have this thought of, if I start crying, I'm never going to stop. But honestly, we're humans with normal humans' emotions, and emotional processing through, you know, crying is not a bad thing and can actually be a very cathartic experience, or even listening to music that matches your emotions. When I talk about journaling, there was actually a very interesting study about journaling during COVID, and what they found out was a very beneficial technique is to be, at the end of every day, journaling 3 things that we are just thankful for or grateful for in our lives. Could have been things that happened that day, or could be things that have just happened in our lives. And then 1 thing that we're looking forward to tomorrow. And they found, just by that very simple technique that maybe takes 5 minutes, people had reductions in anxiety and depression. And so we do see that journaling is a very good activity, especially during COVID, when we have such little time to be able to interacting face-to-face with other people. Spiritual is another type of self-care, so getting in touch with values and what really matters to you. So this could be practicing a meditation or mindfulness, attending an online service, making a gratitude journal similar to what was an emotional, writing things down that are important to you and make you feel alive, or finding affirmations and mantras. When we talk about values, I really like, especially during COVID, when we're just sitting at home and we're thinking, what am I going to be doing for self-care? I don't even know. I really like starting by writing down your values. What are things that are valuable and meaningful to you in your everyday life? Is that family? Is it friends? Is it self-growth? Is it strength? Is it humor? What things resonate with you? So I always like starting by writing a list of values. And then once we look at those, start to think, well, what self-care could start meeting some of those values in real time? I want to take this opportunity to do a meditation. We're going to do a short meditation. We probably won't go through the whole thing just for the sake of time, but we're actually going to do a loving kindness meditation. And so everyone's in their home, and so I like doing these meditations when we're over the internet platforms, because then we don't have any of the self-consciousness with other people kind of seeing us when we're doing meditations. And so everyone in their home, I want you to find a comfortable seated position or a position where you're lying down. And I don't want you to be crossing any of your appendages, no crossing of arms, no crossing of legs or even fingers. I want you to have a very open stance when you're sitting or when you're lying down. And then I want you to lower your gaze towards the floor or close your eyes as I walk you through this short loving kindness meditation. Take a few deep breaths to settle into your body. and into the present moment. Put your hands over your heart to remind yourself that you are bringing not only attention, but loving attention to your experience. Feel the warmth of your hands, the gentle pressure of your hands, and feel how your chest rises and falls beneath your hands with every breath. Now, bring to mind a person or other living being who naturally makes you smile. This could be a child, your grandmother, or your pet. Whomever naturally brings happiness to your heart. Perhaps it's a bird outside your window. Let yourself feel what it's like to be in that being's presence. Allow yourself to enjoy the good company. Now, recognize how vulnerable this loved one is. Just like you, they are subject to sickness, aging, and death. Also, this being too wishes to be happy and free from suffering, just like you and every other being. Repeat softly and gently, feeling the importance of your words. May you be safe. May you be peaceful. May you be healthy. May you live with ease. When you notice that your mind has wandered, return to these words and the image of the loved one you have in your mind. Savor any warm feelings that arise. Now, add yourself to the circle of goodwill. Put your hands over your heart and feel the warmth and gentle pressure of your hand. Repeat to yourself, may you and I be safe. May you and I be healthy. May you and I live with ease. Visualize your whole body in your mind's eye. Notice any stress or uneasiness that may be lingering within you. And offer kindness to yourself, saying, may I be safe, may I be peaceful, may I be healthy, may I live with ease. Rest for a moment in your body, savoring this goodwill and compassion that flows naturally through your own heart. Knowing that you can return to these phrases anytime you wish. Gently open your eyes and stretch out your arms and legs if you need to. I really like that meditation. It's a loving kindness meditation. As you can see, that was pretty simple, but really has a big impact in terms of helping with stress reduction. And so if you're someone, again, who's thinking, I really don't even have time for self-care, there's lots of evidence that shows even just doing 5 to 10 minute mindfulness meditations every day has a very big impact on stress reduction and improving anxiety and depression. And so if you're someone who's taking care of a family member or working or just doesn't have a lot of time, I would really encourage you to look on YouTube and find some of these love and kindness meditations or any kind of mindfulness meditations to assist with self-care. I also mentioned that I really like affirmations or mantras, and this is one that I like a lot as well. And so this one states, this is a moment of suffering. Suffering is part of life. Let me be kind to myself in this moment. Let me give myself the compassion I need. Again, if you're someone who really struggles to sit down and do self-care, I would really want this written, or any other mantra that you identify with, written down so you can reflect on this later when you are thinking about doing self-care or saying, I don't have enough time or I don't deserve it. I think these mantras can be very good, just reminders that self-care is important and you are worth self-care. Other types of self-care include physical. Bodily well-being is good for mental well-being. We know this. So dance, yoga, there are lots of online resources during this COVID-19 pandemic. And so see if there's an online yoga course or something like that that you might resonate with you. Join a class, go for a walk, take a nap, not a very long nap though, and allow yourself 7 to 9 hours. Again, that's going to differ by individuals for sleep. And then socially, stay connected with others. We talk a lot about social distancing. I really prefer the term physical distancing, right? I would rather people not be socially distancing from others. I would say call friends who you haven't seen, email those who you haven't talked with for a while. If you know anyone who is in any kind of skilled nursing facility or in a state by themselves, I would really encourage you to reconnect with those people in pursuit of enhancing that social connection with others. And also avoid those who are negative or who seek to undermine your happiness. I think it's amazing how many frenemies or individuals who really aren't necessarily concerned with our health and well-being are involved in our lives. And so I would really encourage you during this time to just be mindful of, does this person bring me happiness and peace? And if the answer is no, then maybe that's somebody we need to be setting more barriers with and maybe limiting contact during this time. The next barrier that I want to talk about is overload or setting ourselves up for failure. This is where I really like the SMART goals. This is actually meant for I think business kind of individuals, managers, but actually these are very good goals that are really relevant to self-care. And so it stands for specific, state exactly what you want to accomplish, measurable, use smaller mini goals to measure progress, achievable, make your goal reasonable, and set a goal that is relevant to your life, and timely, give yourself time but set a deadline. So in terms of self-care, we would want to identify what specifically is it that you want to do for self-care and pick something that is trackable. So when I talk to some individuals in therapy about, again, setting up a goal for self-care, I have some people who just say, oh, I'll just increase self-care, or I want to feel better. Those are poor goals because they're very ill-defined and we can't measure them. So I have no way to know if you're being successful. We have no way to figure out what sort of barriers we need to eliminate. A better choice would be, I want to do yoga 3 times a week. Or I want to clear my schedule so Saturday afternoons have no activities. Those would be goals that are more well-defined and they are measurable, so we can actually see over time how successful you are in completing those. In pursuit of the next 2 SMART goals, are they achievable and are they realistic? So again, this is a very easy way we can accomplish this is by asking, is this a reasonable goal? If you still are having trouble, then I really like this next one, which is, can I maintain that level of activity or that level of intensity for the next week, the next month, the next year? If the answer is no, then that's not a reasonable goal and we're setting ourselves up for failure. I have a lot of individuals who get very gung-ho and very excited about doing self-care, and they'll say, oh, I'm going to do yoga 3 times a week, and I'm going to go to the gym, which I would really encourage anyone not to be going to the gym during this time. I'm going to go to the gym and I'm going to run 3 miles a day. And this is overload, right? We have picked way too many things. I work out, and even I would say there's no way that I could do yoga 3 times a week and run 3 times a week. That's not sustainable. I couldn't maybe do that for a week. I could not do that for a month or a year. And so really ask yourself, is this reasonable, and can I maintain this goal? So always, always, always start small. Aim for those reasonable and manageable goals. And I really like just asking yourself, what is the smallest step possible? And so sometimes the smallest step possible is actually arranging your environment or talking with other people about self-care. So for example, if you're someone, maybe you and your spouse have children, this might be a smallest step possible would be talking to your spouse about, it's important for me to start focusing on self-care. And in order to do that, I need 15 to 30 minutes a day. Could you watch the kids during that time? And when would be the best time for you, right? So that's a very small step where we are communicating our needs and forming an action plan with how is that other person going to be a part of this and kind of step up and help us. Another small step could be, all right, my small step is I'm not even doing yoga today. I'm just going to go on YouTube and watch a couple videos and see what I like. Perfect. That's the smallest step possible. We've now found a couple different videos that you like. Always the smallest step possible. Nothing is too small. And then lay out a plan. Write it on your calendar, set an alarm, find a buddy. A lot of people will just say, all right, I'm going to do yoga. I'll do it 3 times and I'll just figure out when that's going to happen. Like when I have time, I'll do it. Well, if it's left for us to remember or when we have time, it's not going to happen because it ends up getting pushed further and further onto the back burner. And pretty soon it's Sunday night and we haven't done any of it. Then we get those big waves of anxiety and guilt because that didn't happen. So in order to reduce mood symptoms and increase your chances of success, really be very mindful with putting it on a calendar and setting a time to be doing this. So if you're going to be doing 15 minutes of journaling, when is that going to be most conducive? When do people in the house seem not to need you? I actually have some people who get up about 15 minutes earlier in the morning because that when it's quiet and people don't need them, so they get up 15 minutes earlier to do some journaling. And so you might have to get creative in terms of finding those time chunks that you can use. Be consistent. Again, goes along with putting it in the calendar. This helps make it part of the routine. Be prepared. Make sure that you have everything that you need laid out and ready. So the smallest step could be, all right, I'm going to get my yoga mat and I'm going to find a couple videos that I like and I'm going to get this set out in an area that works in my home. Perfect. And look for other ways that you might be able to make yourself successful. This is where I really like buddies. We're both going to start doing mindfulness and we're going to check in at the end of the week and see where we are. Track your progress. So keep track of your mood, your energy levels, your fatigue. If you want to do yoga 3 times a week, be tracking how successful you are. If we see that we're only getting 1 or 2 times in, does that need to be scaled back? Is there a barrier that's come up that we need to eliminate? Have we perhaps picked a yoga time that's too long? Really reflect on why is this first goal that I made not happening? Do I need to alter the goal or do I need to eliminate a barrier to help make this possible? And also realize that change takes time. So manage your hopes and expectations. Weight is always a good example of this. If I decide, all right, I'm going to lose weight and I'm going to eat right and I'm going to exercise, and at the end of the first week I've only lost 2 pounds and I thought I was going to lose 7 or 8, we really need to be mindful that good long-term change takes time. And so you can always go on fad diets or go overboard and schedule a million self-care things, but again, that's not maintainable. And so we're not just making a temporary change, we are making a lifestyle change. And so those changes are going to be a lot more long-term, and they're a lot more intentional. And so change will be slower than we might expect with some of those more gung-ho approaches, but it will be better over time. Another barrier that people encounter, which I think is the hardest, is limited time. And this essentially comes down to, in order to say yes to self-care, a lot of individuals often need to say no to something else. And again, society, school, parents have taught us to help one another, and we might get that impression that that's just what we do, or helping each other is the way for us to feel liked or accepted, or if we don't do it, we're uncooperative, unlikable, selfish. If those are kind of the thoughts that you're having, I would redirect you back to that thought record that we did earlier. And I also really like this piggy bank kind of image, because you have $10 and you can spend those $10 on whatever you want, but once you spend the $10, it's gone. So the same thing with our energy. If you want to be focusing on self-care, we need to make sure that we have set money aside, or else we're not going to have the funds to be able to do self-care. So what we'll be talking about is saying no. But I also really like to highlight, you can be a good person with a kind heart and still say no. I really like this quote by Lori. I think that's very salient. We're not saying that you should always reject others and only take care of yourself. That's not what we're saying here. But I really want to make sure that we know the difference between self-care and selfishness. Again, self-care is the practice of taking action to preserve or improve one's own health and well-being. Selfishness is very different. Selfishness is lacking consideration for others, and it's an individual who is chiefly concerned with one's own personal profit or pleasure. And so when we think, well, I don't know if I should take time for myself, that feels kind of selfish. Again, that's not what selfishness is. There's a very big difference between self-care and selfishness. And saying no to others is not hurtful, and in some cases can actually help other individuals as well. When we say no, this actually sets a good example of self-compassion. And I always like asking individuals, what message would you want to send to your husband? What message would you want to send to your parents or your children? Would you want to send them the message that you just do things for others until you're all out of energy and you're even hurting your own physical and mental health? Most people would say absolutely not. And so in order, if that's what we want to tell other people, we need to live by example. And so with that being said, how do we say no? And I really like the when, why, and how. As requests start to impinge on your ability to take care of yourself and reduce your ability to address your own mental and physical needs, then it's okay to say no. We're not doing this for purely selfish reasons. And if you are doing better mentally and physically, you're actually going to have more energy to help other people when they need it. This picture down here represents airplane. So if anyone's ridden on an airplane, we always hear that if there's an emergency and cabin pressure drops, your air mask will fall from the ceiling. Please put yours on before you help the other person. The reason that they say this is because if you put on someone else's and cabin pressure is dropping and you lose consciousness, well, now you're unconsciousness and you didn't get this person's mask on. Now they're unconscious and now you can't help anyone. Both of you are unconscious and not of any use to anyone. And so we always put our mask on first, because if we can breathe and we can be mobile, then we can help other people. And so self-care is the same way. If we can reduce our stress and improve energy, we're helping ourselves, and then we are also opening up ourselves to building up energy and time, self-care to be helping others as well. When I always like to remind people that saying no does not necessarily mean I can never help you with that. That can mean several things. That can mean not right now, the timing may not be right, or something more important needs attention. One thing that can be helpful when saying no is sharing your stressors or what you're doing with your time or what's happening in your life, so the other individual can understand why you're doing this. Most individuals often do not share their own stress or issues with others. When we open up about those, these individuals who are asking for help can understand why you have limited time and energy. However, I always like to remind people that you should not feel obligated to share that. If you decide to say no firmly and mean that, you also don't have to give anyone an excuse. But if you feel like individuals might not understand, then you can always share with them why it is that you're needing to take more time for yourself during this difficult time. So how do we say no? Others have often become addicted to our help, and they're used to functioning in their lives with it and may struggle when it's removed. So I think we all have someone in our lives like this who really is just not used to functioning on their own. Saying no for these individuals can actually help them with coping and expanding their social networks. I also like to say it, don't beat around the bush, provide a brief explanation and clarity if you want, but you don't have to. I really like this. This was on Twitter where it says Midwesterners be like, no, yeah is yes, yeah, no is no, yeah, no for sure is definitely. We don't want to beat around the bush. If you cannot help, say that. Be assertive and courteous. I'm sorry, but I can't help with that right now. I'll let you know when I can. And I appreciate you for asking, but I'm stretched too thin to be of good quality help to you. Understand other people's tactics. If someone is tricky or selfish, we need to remember that that's an issue on their part, not on ours, and we probably need to be setting healthy boundaries. And if someone is truly not okay with you saying no and it affects your relationship, I would question that this relationship might be one-sided. You can also put it back on the person and respond by, in this case, your boss asks you to do X, Y, and Z, and you can respond, I'm happy to do X, Y, and Z, but I need 3 weeks to do so. How would you like me to prioritize them? And then be firm. So if you have done these techniques that we've talked about and you still seem to be struggling with finding time to do self-care, whether that's due to saying no to others or due to those thoughts that are kind of running through your head like I don't deserve this or it somehow makes me a bad person, then I would say that's probably when we would like you to find a mental health professional who can help you a little more with this. At the St. Luke's Cancer Institute, we have myself and Dr. Harry, our other clinical psychologist. We offer appointments at Plaza, East of Liberty, and South via video visits. We can be reached at these 2 numbers at the Supportive Services line or the Behavioral Health Service line. And the services that we would provide that could help with self-care would be mindfulness-based stress reduction. We actually have a mindfulness cancer care program, which is a group that runs every few months. Cognitive behavioral therapy to help look at some of those thoughts that might be circulating and making things difficult. Acceptance and commitment therapy to help with identifying values and moving towards meaning. And we also can do role playing if you are having difficulty saying no. We have these appointments in group and individual therapy and video visits and in person. Also with video visits, I would like to remind people, both myself and Dr. Harry are certified in Missouri and Kansas, so you can be located anywhere. But if we don't work with your schedule, you can always find a provider at psychologytoday.com. And if you're interested in some more reading, you can check out these references here. And with sake of time, I will stop for questions.